Oh, hello everyone. My name is Lisa. I work for the Saskatchewan Waste Reduction Council, and I am the moderator today. My coworker Deirdre is the host, who will be helping with the tech side of things. So I'm just here to introduce folks. I'm going to do a quick introduction, then take myself off camera and let folks take it away. First thing I want to do is say a big thank you to our session sponsor today, which is Tetra Tech. So Tetra Tech is a leading provider of consulting and engineering services, and they support government and commercial clients by providing innovative solutions focused on water, environment, infrastructure, resource management, energy, and international development. So they do all kinds of stuff. So a big thank you to them. And now we are going to start off with our speakers. I'll be introducing each one as we go. We should, in theory, have 20 minutes each for 3 speakers, assuming everybody comes. Otherwise, we may have a little bit of extra time if our speakers want it. If you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll be fielding them at the end. So to begin with, I'd like to welcome Noelle Chorney. Is it Chorney? Am I saying it right? Excellent. Okay. Who is the owner of Tall Order Communications, a Saskatchewan farm kid, and a food writer, blogger, and judge, and has been the leader of Slow Food Saskatoon, which is Saskatchewan's first and currently only slow food convivium. I'm not very good at saying that word. I tried before the session. Since 2015. Food is her favorite topic to think about, talk about, write about, and she loves growing it, cooking it, eating it, and sharing it. I feel like we have a lot of similarities as people, potentially. Considering her passion, she is a good fit with the slow food movement's existence in that magical place between joy and justice. So I'm going to take myself off here, and Noelle, you can take it away.
Thanks very much. I'll get this set up, and I just want to let everyone know that there's a very loose association between the slides and the and my talk. I really just wanted to share, since I'm talking about what pleasure has to do with it, I decided to just share as many pictures of food that Slow Food has shared, and people that we partner with who love food. And so those will just be scrolling through while I chat, while I speak. So I will go find it for you. There it is. So thanks for the invitation to speak today and share with you Slow Food's position on food waste. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. I pay my respects to the ancestors of this land and reaffirm our relationship with one another. So today I'm going to begin with a bit of history on Slow Food International and also Slow Food Saskatoon, and then explore Slow Food's position on and proposed solution to food waste. In my introduction, you heard a little bit about the magical space between the joy and the justice. And that was really something that helped me personally connect to why I feel connected to slow food, because it kind of is a difficult movement to really nail down as far as what it's about. It's very complex and means different things to different people. And for the record, it has really nothing to do with slow cookers, or at least slow cookers are optional. So when I heard that slow food occupies the magical space between the joy and the justice, which was said by Richard McCarthy, who is the former executive director of Slow Food USA, when I was able to go to Turin for the Slow Food International Conference in 2018, it kind of hit home to me that that's why this is the movement for me. Because basically I think about being in my life for the long haul. My grandmother is 101, which gives a certain perspective that I'm less than halfway through my life at this point. And I really am committed to serving the world and showing up to make important change. But I can't do that sustainably and avoiding burnout unless I'm really enjoying myself. And so that's where pleasure comes in. So in true slow food style, I don't want to talk about food waste without also considering the function of pleasure. And I don't take pleasure in statistic-filled presentations. So instead, I'm sharing all of these pleasurable photos while I talk about how I and my slow food colleagues have a respectful and holistic relationship to food and how that relates to food waste. So spoiler alert, Slow Food maintains that solving the cause of the food waste problem is not about reducing food waste in the current system, as much as it is about getting to the root of food waste, which requires a value shift. So I'm kind of glad I got to go first, because I feel like I'm going to be giving a pretty big picture approach to this whole issue. Oops, I did not mean to do that. So Slow Food is an international movement that was founded in 1989 by Carlo Petrini, when the first McDonald's opened in Rome. So it was founded in Italy. And it was founded to prevent the disappearance of local food cultures and traditions, the rise of fast life, and to combat people's dwindling interest in the food they eat, where it comes from, and how our food choices affect the world around us. So it really is the opposite of fast food. When you think of all the things that go into fast food, slow food began as the counteraction to that. And when anyone in the movement talks about slow food, you'll hear us talk about good, clean, and fair food for all. Slow food links the pleasure of good food with a commitment to local communities and the environment. So when we talk about good food, we're talking about the flavor, the nutrition, and the enjoyment. When we talk about clean, we're talking about environmental sustainability, food that's produced in a way that is regenerative and supportive of natural systems. And every stage of the production chain, consumption included, should protect ecosystems and biodiversity and safeguard the health of both the consumers and the producers. And when we talk about fair, we're talking about social justice and fair return for labor, being respectful of humans and their rights, the pursuit of balanced global economies, solidarity, respect for cultural diversity and tradition. And when we talk about for all, that's fairly self-explanatory. We're talking about access to good, clean, and fair food as a human right, regardless of class, social, or economic status. So Slow Food International has several campaigns and grassroots projects around the world that cover a wide array of themes. It's a big organization, and those include biodiversity, climate change, food and health, family farms, GMOs, indigenous food systems, land grabbing, traditional production of cheese, meat, fish, and wine, food-related travel, and the reason we're all gathered here today to talk about food waste. So no matter what the issue is, we're usually talking about it while also breaking bread together and enjoying a meal both as a group and enjoying the food itself. Tasting and enjoying and filling ourselves up physically, emotionally, and spiritually while tackling big problems that we care about. The combination of food and pleasure, from our perspective, is not a luxury or a nice to have. Every human has the right to experience pleasure in what they eat. Food connects with many other aspects of life, including culture, politics, agriculture, and the environment. And through our food choices, we can collectively influence how food is cultivated, produced, and distributed, and change the world as a result. So you did hear already that Slow Food Saskatoon is currently Saskatchewan's only convivium, which is what we call slow food chapters. We are slowly moving towards communities. Lisa, you'll be happy to hear. So if we do this again, you won't have to say convivium, maybe. And what we do in Saskatchewan is raise awareness of slow food through giving talks, hosting events, often dinners. We eat together and feed people a lot. We partner with local food security organizations like Chep Good Food and raise funds to send young chefs and producers and activists to Terra Madre, which is Slow Food's international biannual conference in Turin, Italy. Food waste is always a consideration at any of our events. Our member chefs are committed to making just enough food and managing portion sizes, particularly of foods with higher energy inputs like meat. An example was from our last dinner, which was not a food waste specific dinner. It was themed as a field to shield dinner, focusing on both prairie and boreal foods. And we'd all agreed to connect at the end of the meal and have our staff meal using leftovers. But I was the MC and everyone else was sort of snacking all the way through the dinner. And so I was the only one at the end of the night who hadn't eaten. And there was basically a tiny little bowl of mashed rutabaga and a little bit of lentils left over, and that was it. So I missed the gorgeous lamb that went through, and not that I'm ever short of good food to eat, so it wasn't all that bad, but I actually picked up some pizza on the way home because I was still hungry at the end of the night. But that really speaks to how committed they are to going, we have this many people, we're feeding this many people, we will not waste anything. So we have also hosted specifically food waste focused dinners, and there's usually a food waste theme at any of our national summits. One of the slides already went by where we were served a course of carrot cake made from carrot peels, for example. So when we plan our events, our decisions are based on what we value. We want to honor the land that the food was produced on. We respect the time and effort the growers put into raising and harvesting their food. We want to support and promote the growers themselves. And we understand that you can taste the thought and care and love that goes into food produced on a small scale. So we show that respect and honor by making sure none of it goes to waste. There are other global slow food events that help raise awareness around food waste specifically. The Slow Food Youth Network has started the concept of disco soup days, where young people gather food that would have ended up in a landfill and turn it into soup while listening to music and dancing. So another way that we are supporting the idea of pleasure is that we are taking the focus off what you should do and we have to prevent food waste, and rather celebrate the process of saving the food and turning it into something that something enjoyable and fun rather than something that would have been wasted. For anyone who wants to host their own disco soup event, consider planning it for World Disco Soup Day, which is April 27th. But this is still all talking about post-consumer and post-retail choices, which is only a small part of this food waste issue. Food plays a central role for our survival and touches many areas of our personal and public lives. It has an immense and essential value for our health, well-being, and prosperity. So it's unacceptable then that people in Europe and North America waste more than half of all the food we produce, which the most recent percentage that I saw is based in Canada, and it was 58% of all food produced gets wasted. Meanwhile, 1 billion people in the world are suffering and dying from hunger. So the fight against food waste is a fundamental aspect of our work when we're talking about good, clean, and fair food for all. So let's talk about the core of this problem. When you reduce food to a commodity and assign only cash value to it, you set the stage for food waste. Food waste cannot be fought in a meaningful way until we recognize food as a common good. And when we undermine the value of food and treat it as a commodity and then look at the issue of food waste from that point of view, we will never address the root cause, but only the symptoms. Food waste is the result of a lack of value attributed to the production of food itself during all the stages of the food chain. Waste and overproduction is inherent in industrial food production systems. Like other price-led commodities, food has to circulate easily and rapidly, and we live in a consumer system that's founded on a perpetual production, consumption, disposal, production cycle. Essentially, if you had just attended Darren's keynote talk, it's basically the linear system that Darren was referring to. That's where we are right now in food production. And it could be argued, as Darren did, that that system is unsustainable for any product. But in the case of food, which is continually consumed and involves perpetual extraction of resources and the taking of life to create a perishable product, it is simply unendurable. The separation of food from nature and culture allows the current system of overproduction and waste. The way to reduce waste and feed the world is to produce less food and produce it more wisely. We need to consider not only how much food we have, which, by the way, in 2014, we produced enough food in the world to feed 12 billion people, but rather how it is produced, distributed, and consumed, and to consider all the resources that are used in the process, and the impact of the production, distribution, and consumption of that food. So here are some questions to ask yourselves about all of this. What is the ecological impact of food waste? What is the carbon footprint of food produced and not eaten, or the blue water footprint of that food? What about the amount of land that produced food that went uneaten, or the biodiversity loss of monocropping for the purpose of food that never gets used? What is the economic impact on producers, on retailers, on households, on taxpayers, paying waste management costs, including the maintenance of landfills, transport costs, operations costs, or the cost of inefficiencies caused by waste with high water content going into incineration? What is the cultural impact of losing our knowledge of how to grow and prepare food in a way that honors our cultures, the traditions of our ancestors, our connection to our identities? What is the ethical impact of disposing of food while people in low-income countries or people below the poverty line in rich countries have no access to suitable food? What is the ethical impact of a current system that degrades farmers and food producers to commodity producers, or of using land in the global south to produce export crops for rich countries at the expense of the citizens in the global south? Or of a system that overproduces and wastes food, which endangers and pollutes our limited commons, our air, our water, our soil, and degrades living creatures into commodities exploited to produce as much as possible, as fast as possible? These are big and uncomfortable ethical questions. And it really does pose the question, what does food wastage say about our attitude toward humankind or toward our commons, which hold the future for our next generations, or our attitude towards all living things? So then we can apply those questions to some of the current solutions that are out there. That was the lamb that I didn't get to eat. Some of the current solutions that are out there right now. So distributing or donating food that would otherwise go to waste to food banks to redistribute to people who don't have enough, which doesn't solve the underlying issue of poverty. Or turning rejected, unfinished, or damaged food into feed or bioenergy, which appears to be a viable solution, but it also creates the risk of creating a value market for surpluses and creating incentive for producing more. So it doesn't lessen the ecological impacts. Or finding ways through technology, either on the farm, through innovation, or through specialty food ingredients to preserve and extend the shelf life of foods. But that still just is making the existing system more efficient, but it doesn't change the inputs really that go in or go out. And none of these prevent the generation of food waste in the first place. So in order to truly ease the pressure on resources and remove the injustices of the current food system, we need to restore the value of food and produce only as much food as needed for human consumption. To do that would require a shift from industrial agriculture to a system based on small-scale, family, sustainable farming, attentive to the needs of those who eat and of nature. Eating is one of the most intimate acts. We take this food into our bodies through our mouths daily. What happens when we remember that this food is not just curbing hunger pangs, not just calories or nutrition, but a magical combination of sunlight, water, and earth elements raised and harvested by a steward of the land and alchemized through cooking or some other techniques that have been passed down to us from our ancestors? We start to ask where that food came from and how it was grown. And we might see the value of getting to know the growers and the makers. We would pay attention to when certain foods are in season. We would try our hand at growing some ourselves. We might think about the animal that gave its life for our meal. And we would respect those growers, the land, the sun, the water, and the food itself enough to learn how to use it and enjoy it and not let it go to waste and come closer to that circular cycle that Darren was also speaking about earlier. And when we are that invested in this act that we have to do every day to survive, we begin to enjoy it. We know the story of it and the life of it. We take sustenance from it in a different way. Shopping, growing, cooking, and eating are not a chore. They are an act of building and maintaining relationships, of respect, of taking pleasure in the food we eat and the lives that sustain us. And I understand that what I'm talking about is change at a systemic level, and that can feel overwhelming. But I propose that at this time in history, it's an excellent opportunity to rethink our global society at a systemic level. But the first step is in the choices each of us makes, and those choices, when made en masse, can change the world. Thank you.
Thank you. That was absolutely delightful. Thank you. I learned a lot. You reminded me to pass that specific lamb contact on to a friend who had asked for it. I'm sorry that you didn't get to have any at that dinner. I passed some products from that farmer, and they are delightful. Next, just to make sure that we have time for everyone to speak today, and there will be time for questions at the end as well. Although if you have them along the way, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them when we have a chance. So I'm going to welcome our second presenter. Let me just bring up my notes here. Yeah, thank you. So Tim Corcoran is the Vice President of Business Development for Moloch North America Limited. He's held leadership positions for more than 25 years, and he has extensive experience working with municipalities, architects, developers, and property managers. Through his experience, Mr. Corcoran, and I hope I am pronouncing that right, I apologize. Yeah. Okay, good. Provides responsible solutions to waste and recycling containment with an emphasis on seeking solutions that increase operational efficiencies while improving diversion rates, all while reducing the environmental impact of waste and recycling collection. So a lot of things, a lot of achievements, a lot of focuses, but now we're going to be addressing more of the issue of when we do unfortunately have wasted organics, what are we going to do with them? So I'm going to take myself off camera again, and Tim, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And if the food always looked as good as what we saw on the screen, then I don't think there would be any food waste for us to worry about, which would be super. Let me just get it set up. I'm hoping everybody can see the screen, and we will be, oopsie, good to go. I guess that didn't work. All right. There we go. Okay, so thank you. I'm with, as Lisa had mentioned, I'm with Moloch North America, and it's a pleasure to be here to speak specifically about organic containment as it relates to the semi-underground receptacles. But before we kind of get into some studies that we've done, unfortunately, there will be some statistics and some charts that we will go through on the containment system. But I'll give you a little bit of background on Moloch and where we hailed from. I think, okay, sorry. There we go. And when it first started almost 30 years ago in Finland, this was the reason why the system was created, was to better contain the garbage. We've all seen situations where the waste has been blown over, been knocked over, and it's strewn just about everywhere. Our founder, Veikko Sally, had a number of hotels and community centers and was tired of seeing images like this behind his building and felt that there was a better way to contain the waste and contain more of it in a smaller footprint, because clearly this is not what you want to be looking at out your back door every day. Since that time, we have expanded to over 40 countries, and we've been in North America in a little town called Mount Forest, Ontario for 21 years now. That's where we manufacture and distribute all of our product throughout Canada, US, and into Mexico. Just talk a little bit about the units, just so that there's an understanding of what they're comprised of, what they do, and why they work to a certain extent. It's a two-prong piece. So you have an outer well that is 8 feet in height, 5 feet of which is below ground, 3 feet of which is above ground. What this allows it to do is naturally compact. It also allows it the coolness of the earth to reduce the odor, allowing you to maintain the waste and organic matter for a longer period of time. And we'll talk a bit about that in a couple of minutes. The well itself is a rotationally molded virgin polyethylene, which essentially means that it's one continuous piece of plastic. So from an environmental standpoint, there's no need to worry about anything leaching into the ground. Inside is where the waste is kept, and it's kept in either one of three different types of receptacles. One is for regular waste, as you can see. The other is called a semi-hard lifting bag, which is primarily for restaurant-type waste. And the one on the far side, which is our hard-sided lifting container, is specific for organic waste. The white tag that you see is a ISO safe working tag. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because it is crane lifted, and we'll see some pictures, you want to make sure that the amount of weight in the bag can be held. That ISO tag has been awarded to us for our product and ensures that those bags can hold up to 1,250 kilos of waste. And that's important because when you get to this, you want to make sure that that is not going to break. This was an example in Europe where one of our partners had decided to demonstrate the strength of the bag by lifting up one of their service vehicles or van. We were watching it, and clearly if there's any fear of it breaking, we would have been a whole lot further away, and so would the gentleman who was actually spinning the van while demonstrating the integrity of the product. If it breaks and you're in a situation like this, where you're next to a home or outside of a fast food restaurant, it's gonna cause considerable damage. So you want to make sure that that yellow tag that you see in the middle picture is there, and that there is a safe working load. The safe working load for organic material is 450 kilos, and again, the whole unit has to make sure that it can contain that. Within this picture, you can also see how tight that the service vehicle can get into to service it. So it takes up considerably less room than the traditional type of waste containers. You can see how low it is. The service person is outside of the truck. So again, a certain element of safety is also there. Now we've had a number of questions posed to us by municipalities specific to waste and organic material, and referencing the need to have it stored within a climate-controlled room. Our contention has always been, and continues to be, that Mother Nature will do a significantly better job of keeping the waste cool, keeping the odor away, keeping the animals away, than any climate-controlled room, and will do so without any impact to the environment. But in order to, unfortunately, they didn't believe us. So we went to a company called Earth Rangers, and I'm just going to click a quick video featuring a couple of the people at Earth Rangers talking a little bit about what they did, a little bit about Earth Rangers, and then we'll go into some of the data.
I'm not certain if we're able to hear the audio. It's not coming through for me. Deirdre, are you able to help?
No, I am not able to. I think it's probably going to have to be something.
Okay, are there any closed captionings available?
I don't know if there's closed captioning on this program.
Is it possible for people to be able to access this video through a link or somewhere online?
I can certainly make it available afterwards.
Excellent. Then I apologize for the technical difficulties. I'm interested in listening to it, but if we're able to share it afterwards, that might be our best bet at the moment.
Okay, sure. I will. What I will do is just sort of discuss a little bit about what they were saying, and
Absolutely.
talk a little bit about what Earth Rangers is. So Earth Rangers is a facility. They test various products to see if they meet sustainability. So they have tubes for heat. They have the solar panels. They are a platinum rated LEED building, probably one of the best in North America. In addition to that, they also have an educational component which is geared to kids, and they use animals to explain the environmental impact of not respecting the environment on animals to kids, if that makes any sense. So they will rescue animals and then talk about the environmental impact if we're not being responsible that it has on wildlife. They decided a number of years ago to pull their conventional bins out of their climate controlled room, one, to reduce the collection frequency. And what Julian was saying, and I will share this, was that they were going from once a week collection to once every 2 weeks collection, which helped to reduce truck traffic and ultimately greenhouse gas emissions. And that was in part because of the size, the capacity, but the room was also, the amount of space that the units took up was quite reduced. And they were also able to continue to hold the organic material for a longer period of time and reduce the odors associated with it. We had asked them, in order to, I guess, combat the thought that a climate controlled room was better than what Mother Nature would do, we had asked them to do some tests for us. And, whoopsie. And so what they did was they put, they tested both our waste and our organic units. As you can see, they put in 4 temperature nodes, one at the top of the bin, one 25 inches from the top, 25 inches from the bottom, and of course the bottom of the bin. And they logged the temperatures every hour to see what would the average temperature be over the course of a year. In fact, we did it over the course of 2 years. So for the first year, this was the result. So when we take a look at, on the one side is you've got your waste container. On the other side, it's the organic container. They pegged the climate controlled room at 22 degrees Celsius. And so what we discovered was that on the waste side, at no point, except for maybe at the very top of the bin in July, did it exceed the temperature of a climate controlled room. And it was just by 0.4 degrees. On the organic, it did exceed the temperature of a climate-controlled room at the top of the bin. Anything that was ground level or below, and there's 5 feet of capacity below ground level, was below what a climate-controlled room would be at, which was the 22 degrees Celsius, which told us that if the temperature is right, then that means that the rate of decomposition is going to be slowed compared to what a climate-controlled room would be, and therefore the odor would be reduced. So we took it a step further, and we also took a look at the odor. And what they used was what's called a Chenomax odor monitor. You can see it on the screen, which essentially was kind of a large 1970s cell phone type thing, quite a big unit. And they would walk around each of the units and walk around the climate-controlled room, and it would pick up any odor particulates. We did it for the first year in 2017, and it basically demonstrated that the odor within the units was significantly reduced, except during those hotter periods in the summer. We did see a bit of a spike, but nothing compared to what was being experienced in a climate-controlled room. We didn't think that it was measured enough, so we wanted them to do it for a second year. And so it was measured more frequently, and what we saw again was that there were additional blips of where there might have been a bit of odor, but again, nowhere near as significant as that of a climate-controlled room. And so what that told us, or tells us, is that when you're looking at containing the organic material, you can do so without using any energy, without going to the expense of a climate-controlled room. And because of the way it's collected and the amount that it can store, you can put it close to areas that are convenient for the user, which is going to encourage greater usage, which will in turn encourage greater diversion. You can also put it in areas that you may not otherwise put waste, close to a patio, close to a building, as we saw in the pictures, where you would never consider putting carts that were filled with organic matter, because in the weather that we've had, which has been a couple of weeks of 30 plus degrees, you're not going to want to be around it for very long. And it would render those windows in those buildings, you'd have to keep them closed, and it would be fairly unpleasant if they were carts. Whereas with ours, it allows it to reduce the odor because it reduces the temperature. And we took a look at a couple of other things that kind of go hand in hand with this, and that's the diversion statistics in Canada. And these are ones that we found online. So there may be updated ones, there may be more accurate ones, but these are the ones that we were able to readily find through doing some online searches. And when we take a look at them, when we take a look at the national average, total diversion statistics of 27%, residential is 32%. In Saskatoon in 2017, 21.3% of multi-res was diverted, and 29 or 30% of single family. They're great numbers, but it provides us with a significant way to grow. In Toronto, single family diversion is 64%, multi-res is 28%. So again, they're not meeting what some of the green initiatives have called for, and which gives us an opportunity to really build on that. A number of years ago, in conjunction with the City of Toronto, we did a pilot project in the beach area, which is down by the waterfront. It was a smaller condominium, 20 units, and mostly seniors. At the time, they had one forklifted unit for garbage collected twice weekly, and then 4 recycling carts collected once weekly. They didn't have organics. We came back to them with a recommendation. Now, this is back in 2002. We came back to them with a recommendation of an M3000, which is a 4-yard unit for garbage, an M5000, which is our larger unit, 6.5 cubic yard equivalent for the recycling, and our M organic unit for the organics. They were able to reduce the number of collections, so the garbage went to once a week, the recycling went every 2 weeks, and the organic they collected once a month. I'm not sure if you'd want to keep it for once a month. You can, clearly, but I think we recommend once every 2 weeks in the summertime, and you can probably push it to once every 3 weeks in the wintertime. The end result was that they were able to save $260 a month and drive the diversion rate from 21% to over 60%. Now, that's primarily as a result of diverting the organic material. But if we think about what the average is in the City of Toronto, according to the City of Toronto, it's 28%. In 2002, in a building that was occupied primarily by seniors, they were able to take the diversion rate from 21% to over 60%. The reason is because the units are accessible, there's no odor attached to them, and they make it easier to do it. If you don't feel there's no dirt, because they're emptied from the bottom, they're filled from the top, emptied from the bottom, the top rim, which you're depositing the waste through, is clean. So you're not having to open up a dirty, sticky lid, because the garbage all goes out the bottom. It maintains its cleanliness. So it allowed them at that time in 2002 to exceed the diversion rate that we are now experiencing in the multi-residential field. So some of the highlights, when it comes to organics, one of our organic units will hold the equivalent of 6 carts. So again, you're reducing space, you're reducing collection frequency. They're definitely accessible. They meet the accessibility guidelines. So as you can see in the picture, if you're having to use a mobility device, you can still access the units. They require less on-site space, so you can free up additional space, whether it be for parking, for green space, or for development space if you're looking at adding to your development. And you can cluster them. So you can get, as was indicated or outlined with earth rangers, you can get a great deal of capacity in a very small footprint. The picture that you're seeing there is 2 of our 6.5 yard units and 1 of our organic units in a very tight footprint. You can squeeze them together, and because it's crane lifted, you don't need to worry about having the truck access it directly. The crane will reach 7 meters or 23 feet, and then you can have them as far away as that and still be able to access them. So it provides you with the opportunity to place them where it's convenient for people, which will ensure that they get used appropriately. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim. We have one question here, which I believe we actually, well, actually, I may hold the questions to the end, just so we make sure that we have enough time for all 3 presentations. If we have extra questions, we can always run over into the networking session, which follows. So again, thank you. And there will be questions about your presentation later. And at the moment, I will welcome Jamie here. Thanks, Jamie. I'm glad that you could be here today.
Hi, thank you for bearing with our technological difficulties today.
Oh, it's the challenges of making something like this happen online. There's always a fair number of wrenches in the system. So Jamie's here from Resources, and I'm going to just let you take it away. Hopefully we won't have any further trouble.
Sounds good. Thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure to talk about food waste and the food waste space. I have a presentation which I'll switch over to kind of outline basically what Loop does. Loop is a network of existing community options for organic waste, and we work primarily with wholesale and retail grocery providers and primary growers, so greenhouse operations, market garden type scenarios where there is excess product that they don't have capacity for in their downstream side. We have worked in pretty much every province in West with about 5 of the 7 major grocery chains. Can you see this presentation right now if I bring it up like this?
I'm able to see your presentation. Other folks can indicate in the chat.
Okay, well, we'll roll through it. Tell me to back up if we get in trouble. Loop is founded on the premise that we should be pursuing the highest and best use terminal destination for everything we bring into our communities. We invest a lot of energy in the transportation and manufacture and packaging of organic material, primarily food, in North America. And what we want to do is make sure that we hit the top parts of the usage scale whenever possible. Typically, this means we should reduce the amount that's wasted, but of the things that are unsaleable out of a grocery store, for instance, let's feed people. So we work with charities and provide umbrella insurance policies to grocery stores to make it safe for them to make them feel safe. There are actually quite a lot of legislations in place to protect charities and charity use donation, but a lot of it comes down to infrastructure damage insurance and brand damage insurance and things like that. And then we utilize the product to feed animals. So whether it's chickens or pigs or sheep or goats or cows, we can take food that people can't eat and we can turn it back into food locally, as it should. These are all pictures from my farm. Those are our large black pigs, an English breed. The goat's cheese is in the corner, the vegetables and the solar passive northern greenhouse is all things that we've invested in to make sure that we are responsible for our own production and consumption. What's neat about Loop is that we've managed to build a very resource-light system. So we're quite successfully working within the natural life cycle of organics, which is that things grow, things are consumed by the top level order animals like people, and then they're consumed down the chain by the people farther down the totem pole until there's really not much left. And anything that's not grazed off in nature turns back into soil and starts again next year. This is a great system that we're essentially trying to reinvent for ourselves inside an industrial world. A lot of what Loop does is building safe, compliant systems. So are they CFIA compliant so that farms are doing the right thing with what they receive? Is it safely segregated so the farms can comply with all of the regulations CFIA imposes on small farms? And then can we do the same thing at the store level? Are we food safe? Are we work safe? Do we meet their loss prevention and asset protection standards? And then finally, what do we do with the plastics and cardboards and things, which is probably beyond the scope of this talk here. Loop began as a pilot program in northern British Columbia. We currently operate in just over 100 communities in the 4 western provinces and 1 territory. And in Saskatchewan specifically, we work in Regina, Saskatoon, Yorkton, Melfort, Tisdale, Moose Jaw, and Prince Albert are the main locations. There's a couple pins missing on the map, I noticed, primarily Moose Jaw. What I'd like to do is give a brief overview of how it works. It tends to be a contract with the store to protect them, an agreement for service to ensure that they have service every day. If we don't service the store, we pay penalties to ensure that this happens. And then direct to farm use. So we want to make sure that there's enough local capacity in the charity and the agriculture landscape to make beneficial use of the product, not just use it and turn it into soil, but turn it into something good. We've been able to do this in very remote communities in very short notice. It's infrastructure and capital light. We're not asking for really any money at all. It tends to be quite self-sufficient in the contract with the grocery store. And we would entertain pretty much any proposal. If someone has an organics diversion problem at a grocery store, retail, or wholesale level, we would love to talk about solutions. We're very solutions focused, and we've come up with some fairly innovative ones in more complex communities for agriculture. Places like Port Hardy, where there's very limited agriculture, or Canmore, where agriculture in the conventional sense is prohibited in the surrounding area because there's a park that borders the town. What does this look like? Okay, these are all examples of direct to farm loads. So the charities have already taken what they can utilize, and this product is now going to feed local farm animals. Interestingly, we began with my farm working with Loop so that we could basically reduce our cost of feed. Our motivation was economic. And what we found is that the spin-off benefits were symbiotic. So we end up with healthier animals. Our chickens are much healthier, fully feathered all the time. We don't end up with a lot of like pest feather pulling and pecking at blood spots and things like that. Our animals have a higher live birth rate, and they have a higher carcass yield in general. So that's been a really cool spin-off that we have. And as much as we've saved money on the farm, we've also increased productivity due to better animal health and vitality with a mixed variety of nutrients coming into their system. The lower left-hand picture here might be a little hard to see. That's one of the loads out of one of the stores on one day. It's roughly 8 tons of pumpkins that was frozen overnight and had to be disposed of. This is one in the lower right-hand corner. This is some of the product going out in a very small community. So they actually used a farm pickup for this load. And this is what's left after. So all of that food gets broken down. That exact pickup truck load that we looked at is now our left-hand size recyclable bags. Food is out of the package. The package is sorted by recycling destination, and that's where the majority of the packaging goes. Although on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see there's some awesome reuse options we've had coming up where people are building mini greenhouses and seed starters. And while that's not able to utilize 100% of the wasted packaging, it really is the highest end of the hierarchy of recycling, using something the way it is. Don't break it down, don't turn it into something else. Utilize it as it is for at least one more function. This is one of our farms who is also a mixed media artist. She's done a number of sculptures and art projects using the waste plastic from the loads that she receives from the grocery store. We love her work. Moni Thompson, she's an award-winning, I don't forget which award she won, but it was a fairly prestigious one for her work in mixed media art. Loop has been on a fairly consistent growth trajectory, excluding COVID, where we've been able to continually add grocery stores to the network, and we've never had a scenario where we've had to decline service or step back from a store. Last month, we diverted, this was actually for the month prior, so we actually diverted closer to 1.5 million kilograms from landfill in the last month. Working through 76 charities and 1,563 farms in Western Canada. Most of our farms are small family farms and agro-innovators, people who are looking to build local food security, are looking at new ways of production, whether it's animals that haven't been tried or new greenhouse methodologies or more bio-intensive cropping. And that's one of my favorite features of Loop, is that we tend to take this garbage product, which would have been a cost item to the store, and we turn it into positive social momentum. And we can do this in a community as small as Tisdale with a week's notice to start it up, or we can do it in a place as large as Edmonton, where we handle, I think we handle 42 store locations in Edmonton alone. The interesting store level impact for us is, even though our volumes as an organization are growing, our average per store waste has been reducing. And our theories are, we have a few different theories on that, but the one we hear most consistently from the store is due to its accumulation, the fact that we're collecting all of the day's waste in one spot and sending it out every single day. It's very tough to hide from the fact that these are the inefficiencies in your store. And the managers target those with, how can we reduce what we're sending out of the store? This is a average store volume out of one store in kilograms. That's the scale on the left, from December 2017 through the middle of April 2019. I had hoped to update this slide, and we actually ended up having to genericize the name of the store because the brand got a little twitchy there. But you can see over time they've gone from like December 2017 to December 2018, they've gone down almost 120 kilograms per day average volume. And that's a huge savings to the store when you factor a kilogram of retail value waste is between $3 and $7 a kilogram of countertop sale value. So this store, even though they've taken on the Loop program, and we tend to reduce their workload in store, but we do come with insurance costs and a contract rate that we work with the store food waste alone. And our initial contract rate was offset by a reduction in garbage, more than the value of the program. So we're cheaper than garbage, but you can also save money by reducing your waste. This is a graph that it's quite chaotic, but it includes every brand in every store we work with every day, averaged by week. So you can see the general trend in all departments is on the decline. Produce makes up about half of it. That's the green line in the middle. The red line along the top is the whole volume load. And then across the bottom, we have the more noisy departments like dairy and meat and deli and things that can theoretically be sold within their expiration date, but always have some residual shrinkage from package damage or customer handling or loss in transit. But as an aggregate total of all the stores we work with, it's neat to see that our stores on average decline over time. We also have done waste audits to make sure it's not kind of sneaking back into the garbage, where we tear apart a load on the scale floor and just sort of count how many food items are in there. And in general, there just isn't any. There's a little bit from their restaurant or deli, which are products we can't safely handle maybe, from post-consumer bins. So these are things people buy a meal and they don't eat every piece of sushi and one gets thrown out. But retail level, pre-consumer, we have next to no waste in our system. That's the speed view. We're trying to make up a little bit of time here. Maybe you can let me know. I had thought that we'd do a short presentation and then dive into questions. So maybe what I'll do is I'll hand it over to moderation. Lisa, if you want to jump in and direct it from here. We're happy to field questions, but we understand there are also some pent-up demand for questions from the other presentations.
Certainly, Jamie. Thank you so much. I was actually expecting us to go a few minutes over, but I'm very impressed that you were able to pull it all back in to 1:30 p.m. So I think we'll spend about 5 minutes doing questions here, and then I expect there will be more questions, but at that point we'll move everyone on over to the Space Odyssey networking and social time, which is another hour and a half of specifically discussion and questions for this afternoon's speakers. So I'm just going through here. It looks like Bernie had the first question for Tim, but it seems like that's been answered now. If there's a further question, to let us know. And then we have from Agustina, and I think this is maybe sort of aimed at all three speakers more generally. It's a bit broader. Wondering about, I'll just read it. In 2015, the United Nations, members of the United Nations set a target to reduce food waste by halving food waste by 2030. Do you three think the three levels of government in Canada are doing enough to meet this target? If not, what should they be doing differently? Does anybody want to have a go with that? Big question, a large question.
Sure. I'd take a stab at that one if you like. We've done two presentations to Madam Bibo and Tom Rosser, the Director and Deputy Director of Agriculture Canada, talking specifically to their food policy team. And they have some neat initiatives coming. We've encouraged them in the role of support. Rather than come in with legislation has unintended consequences quite often, where we say we're going to do something, we put some legislation in place, and then it turns out there's a quick way to meet the objectives stated in the legislative package, but they bypass the main net effect that we were gunning for. And so we've encouraged them to take a fairly flexible approach to that. And I'm really encouraged with the questions we've been having from the Minister of Agriculture and how they're thinking about this. And you can always do more. That's the bottom line. You can always do more. But I think that we've got some really good people on the policy side. The real problem is political footballs. They're always looking to score political points from the elected side. So you have the research side coming up with good stuff, and the elected officials needing to fit it into the games they play. Basically, that's kind of a broad answer to a fairly pointed question, but I think they're doing good things. I think that we're going to see good things, but you can always do more. So there's room there for new ideas to be brought forward, and there's an appetite to hear them and implement them.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Thank you for that, Tim or Noelle. Do either of you want to weigh in?
I just looked at the words of it because that just seems like such a complex thing to say, and who they were targeting. And when I look at it, they said they wanted to have post-consumer food waste and reduce it on the production and distribution side, which I think is, considering the production and distribution is about 2/3 of all of the food waste. And that, again, is part of that whole system that I was talking about, and just changing the whole commodity approach, which is a big issue. But putting the pressure on consumers and retail is considering that they are 1/3 of the problem. Doesn't feel like quite enough. Well, I mean, just the requirement on the UN side feels like it won't reduce it by half. It sounds better than it actually is. And then I don't know enough about policies in Canada. That was, Jamie was better able to speak to that, but it just feels like it is a complex question, and where we put the pressure, I mean, it's the whole thing that's the issue.
Yeah, it's a big and multifaceted issue, and it is, I think, sometimes telling which aspects of the big issue that different organizations try to work on. Tim, did you want to say anything?
We're obviously more involved in the containment side of it. So assuming that there is going to be food waste, what's the best way to contain it? It would be great if there was significantly less food waste. It might impact our business, but it'd still be a wonderful thing. But we look more at the containment, and we see some of the challenges with municipalities and governments on their openness to looking at a variety of initiatives to better contain and better deal with organic material in general.
Mm. Well, thank you. I'm going to field two final questions here, and then we'll end this session and we'll move over to the networking one. I just want to make sure that both of these remaining two get addressed while they're here in the chat without losing them. While Augustina has one more question, and I'm going to go back to that, first I'm just going to take a question by Natasha, which is for Tim, while you're on screen. And Natasha asks, was there also an increase in education for residents during the pilot program? What was the role of community engagement or education in increasing their individual use of diversion options? So yeah, just sort of what was the community education side of stuff like?
For the pilot, there, aside from introducing them to the system, working through what went in which bins, there wasn't a great deal of education. They were already separating their recycling from their waste. We introduced the organic unit. They're still in place today, and just said, this is where they go. This is what should go in it. In Toronto, we're pretty lucky because just about everything, not just about, but there's a lot of items that can go into the organic unit that are not allowed to go into a lot of municipalities, like diapers, plastic bags can go in it. So a lot of the residents would they still do, put their organic material in a plastic bag, tie it up, and throw it in the unit. So from that standpoint, there really wasn't a great deal of education, and they seem to have adopted it and are continuing to use it 18 years later. Does that answer the question?
I believe so. Thank you. It sounds like it was lucky that in particular in the location where you're doing the pilot project, the level of general awareness and education was already relatively high, and also the program itself was relatively flexible.
At the time, there was still, I believe at the time Toronto was doing single family separation, I believe. So it wasn't completely foreign. And it was a smaller building, which allows you to connect with each of the residents. It is more difficult in the larger buildings, but I still think there are ways to do it that get the message across that it's of benefit, not only from an environmental standpoint, but also from a cost standpoint to the residents. So we do work with others on that side. Okay.
Thanks. Jamie, you asked if you could add one closing thought to the issue of the distribution of waste.
Yeah, I wanted to just tag on to what Noelle was mentioning regarding the percentage of the waste that is driven in the manufacturing and redistribution and retail side of it. And when we were speaking with the minister directly, we feel like there are solutions in place and there's a desire to implement them. So we're seeing a huge uptick in wholesale and retail grocery awareness, and in the internal incentive to reduce this volume. So there's money on the table for them to save, and there's a desire to save it. You see the same at the manufacturing end. As a farmer with a farm background, I view the field loss in a slightly different light than actual food waste. So because it's turning back into soil in a positive way, not through a regulated compost system, we don't measure those numbers the same, but they are turning back into soil very naturally. From that point on, out of the field or out of the greenhouse, we have worked with every level of the food chain and found positive solutions at every step and a desire to implement it. So I think we're in a really good place and we have momentum in a positive direction. And it's a fair point that reducing post-consumer waste is just a small part of the picture. It is the thorniest problem in our estimation, because there are good solutions for everything else that are actually working.
Thank you. I think that's a fair insight, and it's always, especially, it's important to hear directly from the folks who are involved at the different stages of the process to make sure that we all understand what the background is. The last question that I'm going to address here before we end this session and go to the networking one is also from Augustina, and it says, it's talking about how recently the Ministry of the Environment released a solid waste management strategy, which they did, and that one of the goals is to engage stakeholders to reduce food waste, which it is. And the question is, how best should the provincial government collaborate with municipalities to address the food waste problem? So basically, how the provincial government and municipal governments can best work together on this. Would any of our three presenters like to share their thoughts? You could be speaking to it in the I believe the solid waste management strategy is a federal document, or are we speaking of the provincial document? Comments about Saskatchewan would be the most relevant. Comments from other provinces can be here as well. No, sorry, it's provincial. Okay, so it's Saskatchewan specifically between the provincial government and municipalities. My apologies for my confusion on that. Any of our presenters like to share thoughts?
Well, not to hog all the questions, but I think that having homogeneity of application, so having everybody on the same page on what the metrics are, how we're going to track these, and how we're going to measure success, while pointing to where we want to go. So what we tend to see out there is a really chaotic landscape on the prairies, where there are provincial incentives that are rolled out in provincial capitals, and then there are region by region, particularly in the RMs, where we have really small scale desires to change, but no particular application effectiveness. Like from one community to another, we don't always have the same yardstick being used to measure the same people. And so if the province and the municipalities could come together on a roadmap where they want to go and what that looks like and how they're going to measure it, I think that we would be able to well represent the province as a whole. Even the problem's the same in British Columbia, it's the same one in Alberta. The only one we've seen with a homogenous system is the Yukon, and that's mostly because there's really only two major centers in the Yukon. So they talk, and that's what it is. But having a level playing field and a well-defined one would make it really easy for people to know what they need to do.
I think there's an old cliche about you can only manage what you measure. Not sure if it's always true, but it might be true in this case. Tim or Noel, did you want to share any thoughts?
I think it's key to have all three levels of government working together, all on the same page with a unified strategy, not just in Saskatchewan but across Canada. If we hope to attain the goals that have been laid out, we have a history of missing our targets and extending the targets and moving them off. And I think in part, and I can only speak to the areas that I've worked more closely with, but even in, if you look at Ontario, every municipality operates individually. The provincial government operates to it. It beats its own drum. And then the federal government should be making sure that everything works consistently if we hope to achieve what's been laid out, and I haven't seen it. So therefore, I think it's absolutely instrumental to get everybody working in the same direction.
Thank you. I think that's insightful as well.
I don't have anything else to add. I'm good.
All right, no problem. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for being here and our three speakers for being here, and another thank you to our session sponsor of Tetra Tech.